Michael Schell and Daniela Candillari, welcome to Backstories today. And Daniela, welcome back to Bloomington and the IU School of Music. I just learned today that you're an alumna and a former faculty member.
Thank you.
And we're so excited to speak to both of you about Puccini's La Bohème. I know that you both have spent a significant amount of time with Opera Theater of St. Louis, but have not had the opportunity to work professionally together yet. So what a thrill it must be for both of you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
we both enjoyed
Yes.
doing it. It's one of the things that I love about working with Daniela is that she approaches it in a similar way to me, where I'm always asking the questions like, what does this moment mean? What is this music saying about this moment? And you've done that throughout the process, which has been wonderful and also surprising, because I don't often have a lot of conductors who are going to ask those kinds of questions, which is great.
Well, thank you. Likewise. And I think, as we discussed, La Bohème is such an ensemble piece.
Yeah.
And I think really the way to build an ensemble is to get agency from every participant in it, from the members of that make up the cast, the six principals, with two sort of side roles that are sung by the same person. But I think really, in order to make this an incredibly meaningful experience for the students and for the audience, it's important to ask those questions and to be in constant dialogue of how does music affect drama and drama music, and how do both of these worlds marry each other.
Right, and that's been such a wonderful thing that's been happening in the room, is that I think because they see us asking those questions, they feel comfortable in asking them as well, and that's been a really wonderful thing.
Michael, for the people at home, what is La Bohème about, and what literary work is it based upon?
The story of Bohème is based on these collection of stories that were written in the 1800s by Henri Mouget, and they were published separately in a literary magazine at the time. And then they were put together into a collection called The Scenes of a Bohemian Life. And I'm not going to say it in French because my French is horrible. But it's similar to the sense that it didn't, I'll equate it to our modern day version of Sex and the City. Those were based on columns that were put together into a book about these four women living in New York City, single and living love and doing all the things that they do. And this is very similar. It was about these characters that were living in Paris at the time, who were sort of living an alternative life, a lifestyle that was pursuing arts and music and poetry and all of that. And so I think, so the story wasn't really plot driven. It was just more about the events of their lives. And so then, of course, the plot of Bohème was derived from that, combining a few of the characters, but that it revolves around a character development story where we see these four men interacting with these other two characters, Musetta and Mimi, and sort of their pursuits of arts and love and life. And then, of course, the romance between the two sort of lead characters, Mimi and Rodolfo, how it's shadowed by poverty and, unfortunately, her ultimate illness, her tuberculosis. So.
Speaking of poverty, Puccini kind of had a hard time really hitting his stride. He had a period of somewhat of a struggling artist's life. Do you feel that in choosing this subject matter that it appealed to him because of his own struggles?
Yeah, we were talking about this, and I think, I mean, like, look, I'm not a Puccini scholar, but I have read some stories about him being sort of struggling in conservatory, for example, where he was a roommate with Pietro Mascagni, the composer, and there's a story of them hiding from creditors that came to their house or their apartment. They're hiding in a wardrobe. And then also there's a story that I read of Puccini, selling a coat to have money to go and take this ballerina out for a dinner. So I think he definitely was attracted to it because of it. He could relate to it, but I think it's more along the lines of the fact that I feel it was an open enough story or plot that allowed him to do something musically that he wanted to do. And you were talking about that last night.
Yeah, we were talking about, there was this period in compositional shifting where the young composers sort of needed to find a voice of stories they wanted to tell sort of moving away from Verdi and moving away from bel canto traditions and talking about real people and real struggles of everyday life was kind of the theme that played out and that they wanted to represent. But what I recently learned about Puccini, and it's based on a piece that I did by him that is almost never performed, Messa di Gloria.
Oh.
So that was his graduation program. That was his graduation composition, and he was supposed to become a church musician and follow in the footsteps of his father.
Okay.
And so he chose actually not to do that, but rather,
Oh, wow.
follow the tradition of an opera composer, which is not maybe often the most lucrative position one can immediately step into.
The Verismo style is what you were referring to
Exactly,
before.
exactly. The Verismo style that talks about real life situations, and there's an incredible moment of reality in everything that we're dealing with Bohème. The ensemble members are right now in their 20s,
Yes.
and the characters are in that same age, and all of us have experienced being a poor student,
Yes.
being an artist who is starting up their working life,
Yep.
falling in love for the first time. I mean, those are all themes that everybody has experienced.
Yeah.
Bohème seems to come at a turning point in Puccini's career. His prior three operas had generally been received pretty well, but there's really something about Bohème that just sets him off. He has a series of hits after it, Tosca, Butterfly, Turandot. So what do you attribute to Puccini's success in this opera specifically?
I mean, I think it's a practicality of starting any craft. One has to fail a couple of times before one really finds what works and finds their own voice. And in all of Puccini's operas, we can find stylistical choices that he's already making early on as a younger composer and as a developing composer as well, that sort of highlight his style and his particular musical language throughout his career. But I have rarely known a composer who has written their first opera and that immediately having been a sellout, right?
Right.
Like sort of a thing that everybody wants to see. So I think there's maturity that shows up with every work that is not quite successful that comes into that. But with Bohème, what's particularly exciting and really genius in many, many ways is also the structure of the opera. It's essentially a symphony. It's in 4 scenes. They are called acts, but it's in 4 scenes. And it really does follow the symphonic structure of Allegro, the second movement, Scherzo, the third movement being Andante, being a little bit more of a ballad, or however we want to describe that. And then again, Allegro at the end that sort of bookends the entire symphony. And every time I've done Bohème, I fall in love with different parts of the piece. The orchestration that Puccini uses, which is again very uniquely his, the way that he colors words in strings or in brass or in winds, and the way that he really depicts the quality of the language, the poeticism of the language, that's always something that keeps on bringing me back and keeps on making me appreciate Puccini as composer even more.
Right. I'm not sure this is a reason that he's successful. I mean, or in the way that you're speaking in terms of what brought about his success. But I think what's also wonderful is that he's able to capture the totality of life. He's not just like, I'm going to show life and it's all going to be depressing and sad. He shows there's so much humor in this, and that's what makes these other moments so poignant and beautiful. Yeah. He's able to sort of capture all of that, which I think is something very unique as well.
Michael, for those who have been in Bloomington and around the Jacob School of Music for as long as I have or longer, we've been fortunate to see the iconic David Higgins production once, twice, 3 times maybe. So what do you look most forward to in realizing in this brand new production for our audience, our patrons?
So I had the fortunate experience of not seeing it, which actually helps. I've seen pictures of it, and gosh, yeah, it was definitely quite a stellar looking show. I think for me, what I'm really excited about is, again, getting to do it with these students, this age group. It just changes everything. And for me, in terms of the physical production, I really wanted to create an environment that they could adapt and make their own, and that they could really, that it was so a part of the storytelling versus just this is the attic and this is the building. Like the way that we've designed, or working with Mark Smith, the designer, the way that we came up with the attic is that Marcello, in his pursuits of painting, he's actually painting the walls. He's practicing murals. Of course, they're all kind of based on Musetta, but he's doing it all over the walls, so that it feels very purposeful to them. So the students get that sense of, oh, I really own this environment as a character. Likewise, and when we go into Act 2, Momus, one of the murals that sort of is for Momus is Marcello's. He's painted it. So they get that kind of, I guess, they get that feeling, or at least I want them to have the feeling that they own this environment in a way, versus it just being something that they're being put into. And so that's one of the things I really hope, is that in addition to that we're telling the story that I also wanted to tell was through color. So that in the beginning, the vivid nature of those paintings on the walls, and then also in their costuming, as they learn about life and the difficulties, the color starts to drain from it. So in Act 4, Marcello has painted over, has whitewashed all the walls, and the canvases are gone, and they're trying to start anew. But ultimately, the desaturation of the color is reflected in the fact that life and the harsh realities that can occur in life are invading their once romanticized way of living.
Daniela, I don't know how you feel particularly about Toscanini, but as a conductor, I thought this would be interesting to hear your perspective. He was so young when he premiered this opera, and then 50 years later, he was the first conductor of an original Puccini opera to actually make a recording of it. He recorded it with his famous NBC symphony. What do you feel this work, what kind of impact did it have on Toscanini in his auspicious career at that time?
Well, he was a fantastic musician. One can discuss the way that one leads an ensemble and how rehearsals are run, but that's, that I think is always interesting to see as a sort of historical information. And speaking of NBC, I share this with Michael, there is an incredible sort of 5-minute snippet of Toscanini rehearsing NBC Orchestra on Musetta's Waltz, and on getting pretty close to the finale of Act 2. And it was just fascinating to hear him sing the lines and sort of, instill the style of Puccini into the orchestra. But, for any conductor, what is really, really incredible, and I can't speak for Toscanini, but this is just my thinking, I think it's always incredible to have a composer that we pair with and that we get to know their music inside and out, because it sort of informs work of that specific composer. But the other thing that it does, it makes us approach music by composers who we may not know as craft. We don't have the sense of walking around with gods. We have a sense of walking around with human beings who were incredibly talented and creative and created something that is actually translatable into music. And I think it makes music much more personal. It makes it much more of a real experience, and everybody can participate in that. Everybody can really sort of come as they are and experience music. I think that's really sort of the biggest impact that one can have as a conductor, really understanding a style of a composer who, in Puccini's case, similar to Strauss, similar to Wagner, everybody has such a unique way of writing and notating things. And what I said to the orchestra, the music of La Bohème doesn't fall off the page easily. It is really tricky. It is really tricky. It is tricky for professional orchestras. It is even trickier for student orchestras who just don't have the breadth of experience yet. But the music is really, it's a very specific language, and there's nothing in symphonic literature that represents it and that we can connect to. So I think having that opportunity to work with a composer like that must have been life-changing. And then also for our benefit, actually having that first recording as an archival performance,
Yeah.
as something that we can draw inspiration from, and something where we can understand the style better, is of incredible value. Yeah.
Maybe not always the tempo, but
Maybe not always the tempo, but there's also
Yeah.
historical precedent in, you know, what were we recording on,
Right. That's right. That's
and how
right.
much time could you actually
you
fit?
could fit. Yeah, yeah.
And so one
Right.
had to make artistic choices
Right,
that
right.
were sometimes practical choices, but it all sort of comes together, and it informs
Absolutely.
so many things.
Yeah.
Michael, speaking of tempo,
Yes.
how does the music influence your take on the direction of the production?
Well, you know, that's, I think, like with any opera, I always have to be both in the text and in the music. You have to, there has to be a marriage of it. But with Puccini, we find ourselves often describing certain scenes as being, well, that's the atmosphere that he's trying to create within this dialogue that's supposed to be very intricate and sort of specific. So it's sort of that discovery. You're sort of having to always ask the question, is he trying to show their inner feelings while they are saying something that's very banal? For example, Mimi's third act aria, Dondolieta, she's literally breaking up and saying things like, okay, in the drawer I have my prayer book, and there's this thing over there, and could you just put them all together and I'll have someone come get them. But the music is saying something so poignant and so meaningful, because her heart is like breaking, trying to break up with him, because she thinks that it's the right thing to do, that she needs to take her illness and her sickness elsewhere. But if you look at the libretto, you just think, oh yeah, hey, can you just put that stuff together for me? I'll come get it. Without his music, you don't have what's really being said. So
Absolutely, and I think Puccini is he has such a specific way of notating for singers as well, whether he wants things to be spoken or whether he wants them to be sung in a different way. And the connection of the language to the speed of the music is intricate. Every vowel has an exact duration, for instance. And sometimes Puccini is like Mahler in many ways, or Massenet in French opera, where he really notates specifically every tenuto, every staccato. He's so meticulous about pointing these things out in his scores. But language and the speed of the music are married. One can't deliver it any other way, in a way.
that's right, yeah.
Daniela, I'm delighted to hear all of the beautiful, respectful things you have to say about Puccini. Surprisingly to me, he's been panned by critics and also other composers and musicians over the years. I read recently some pretty scathing remarks from Benjamin Britten, actually,
really?
which really surprised me.
Wow.
But as someone who does admire his work, what do you really find that is most substantive in his compositional style?
One of the things that I love about Puccini is the sense of melodies, the sense of structure that he has. Even when things, there was one tempo that we were discussing the other day with Marcello and Mimi.
Yes.
Un po' di tosse,
That's
ci
right.
sono avezza.
That's right.
And on page, it seems like it's not very instinctive or it's not very intuitive. But when you actually think about the whole structure of the entire duet that's coming, it makes absolutely complete sense in the way that the text is set, in the way that the emotion is set behind it. Right. Puccini also has such unique ways of, like I said, coloring in the orchestra earlier, the pairing sometimes of contrabassoon or bass clarinet in this case, in our case, with harp and cello. I mean, those are just such incredible elements. But another sort of musical moment that is specific to him is the constant offbeats that are very often in violas and in horns and sometimes in second violin. So it's always the inner voices that are actually showing the emotional state of the character. Yeah. And we can trace that really from Bohème to Butterfly to Tosca to Turandot, to all of his great, to Gianni Schicchi, to Suor Angelica, all of them. So, I mean, one of the appeals to me is that it's incredibly well-crafted orchestration, incredibly well-set text, and just gorgeous melodies at the end of the day that that sometimes really leave an imprint.
Mm-hmm.
some of those big romantic swells, those apexes of the phrase, they get you every time.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday we were in the rehearsal with the orchestra, and we were reading the Act 4 duet between Mimi and Rodolfo. And you know, the entrance of trombones in the third phrase, oh man, that got me even in a read session where you just want to focus on logistics and how the piece fits together.
Right.
But it's really these moments of complete honesty in a way as well, and sort of inspiration.
I'm interested to hear your take, both of your takes on this. What impression do you think La Bohème has had on our culture in its over 100 years in existence, but more especially in recent times?
Well,
Take it away.
I mean, I can think of sort of a direct lineage. I mean, certainly we don't have to look further than the musical Rent. I mean, that's sort of in popular culture, 90s. What generation is that? Is that Gen X? Is that?
I have no idea.
I don't know. Anyhow,
Millennial, no?
millennials.
Yeah.
It's millennials. So that generation certainly has had that story being told, but it's seeped into everything. I mean, we don't have, again, another a movie, Moonstruck, that there's a pivotal moment in the movie while Rodolfo is singing Che gelida manina, you know, his big aria in Act 1, and then. Of course, then I think it's also been in The Sopranos. It's even been in Sex and the City, I think, too. So the melodies have sort of infiltrated our culture in popular entertainment in a way that I think some people, if they've ever even seen it, they probably, oh, I know that. I've heard that.
I think purely creatively, or again, craftsmanship, I think it has influenced so many composers in structure again, and in sort of creating, you know, scenes. How do you create the opening of Act 2? How do you start with the fanfare? Sort of what is the mood of the scene that you're trying to show?
That's right.
So I think there are so many practically learning points that we can all take from Puccini. But you know, another thing, and I think you and I talked about this maybe sort of earlier on in our working relationship. I think that the freshness of La Bohème comes from asking those questions over and over again, and not ever sort of relying on repeating something because it's been done.
That's right.
But I think if we do make a decision why we do something, it has to have a reason for everybody in the room.
That's right.
It has to be a really strong why we're doing something, that it keeps it again flying off the page and being a living piece of art.
I think, you know, what you said about how Toscanini sort of, the way that he looked at his music changed the way that he looked at other people's music. I think this experience really, for me, has been truly the way that I feel like I've always examined things, but more so in that I know this opera and I know certain things have to happen, but it's like really taking the time to step back with the students and go, why does this have to happen? Why is this happening? That has made this process, I think, very different from a lot of the ones I've had.
Daniela and Michael, thank you so much for joining us on Backstories today and telling us a little bit about this brand new production of Puccini's La Bohème, opening in November at the Musical Arts Center.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.